I'm going to talk about Uno in this recording. Anyway, first I'm gonna turn the music off. So wait until I do that. There we go. Okay. And by I don't mean like like Youknow, although that might be brought up as well. I mean the game spelled out with YU, which is romanization of a, what? The music came back on even though I turned it off. When I say off, I mean off. It's easier to, there's an argument to be made that is correct, that it's better to, or you're more performant to play the world's hardest game with the music off, because sometimes the tempo of the movement of the dots doesn't line up with the tempo of the music, and that can throw you off. So as in a romanization of a Japanese spelling, which would be whatever hiragana and katakana you use to write you, and the one you use to write no. The one you used to write no is very famous because it's also the possessive, right? So you might be familiar with it. The full name, and there's also kanji with readings of you and no. I actually don't know which one it is. But anyway, the full reading of the title of the game is You Know, the girl that chants love at the bounds of this world, which is kind of an awkward translation. And in the process of talking about this game and what it means and what I want to say about it, I have to kind of put out a content warning, because first of all, I was trying to play the world's hardest game 3 with my left hand. It took me a while to realize what I was doing. That doesn't work, does it? Let me try using my right hand and see if it works better. The content warning that I interrupted myself before I was going out was talking about right-handed and left-handedness in TWHG3 is I'm going to have to mention words like pornography in this. So if you don't want to hear topics and words like that be brought up, then this isn't for you. So with that warning out of the way, what is this game and what am I talking about here? So, and I'm going to go off on many tangents. This is not going to be very well organized. You're going to have to deal with my tangents. In the very early 90s, there was, made by some odd company, which I don't remember the name of, a personal computer made specifically for the Japanese market called the PC-98, which is short for PC-9800 if you want the full name, usually referred to as the PC-98. And this was in the era of DOS and early versions of Windows, so it's a type of DOS. But IBM computers and IBM clones weren't very popular in Japan because they didn't have input methods for Japanese characters and Chinese characters. And so they had their own kind of unique island setting of island PCs around like 1991 or so, I believe, such as the PC-98000. And if you look at a picture of it, it kind of looks like what I would call the cheese box. So if I ever say the word, now this will have to go off on this tangent, what does cheese box mean? So my parents had a computer that ran Windows 3.1. And the reason they bought it because my dad was working on his PhD and he needed something to write the code on. And if you're curious, to complete his PhD, he wrote code in BASIC. Yes, it was in BASIC. That would model a electric internal combustion hybrid powertrain. Actually, it was a transmission. And this was, again, in the early 90s. And I think 1999 or so, Toyota came out, that we got the Honda Insight and the Toyota Prius. Now, the hybrid transmission that my dad came up with to do his PhD, it's not very impressive really in hindsight. Sounds like it's something to kind of do to get it done. But anyway, the transmission that he designed for his PhD, I don't know the details of. I never actually looked at the actual paper. Or any of the actual code. I understand it's quite a bit different than like Toyota's hybrids. It's not really comparable, but he had this computer specifically for doing that, and he did it. He did it using this computer. And when I began to exist a few years later, like about 4 years later. He basically kept it around as like this toy for his kids to play with, including me. So I would do things like go into the system files and delete config.sys. And then it wouldn't be able to communicate with any of the peripherals, and my mom would have to reinstall Windows. And I go in there and I would delete autoexec.bat, and then it wouldn't boot. And my mom would have to reinstall Windows. And anyway, I would just delete everything because I didn't really understand how the file system even worked. I would just kind of like browse through it kind of crazy willy-nilly. Anyway, someone nicknamed, it was actually my older sister, nicknamed it the cheese box, which it wasn't really yellow. It was kind of this off-white kind of polar cream color. But when I look at it, I look at a PC-98 and I go, oh, that's the cheese box. I kind of wish I still had the cheese box, but they eventually donated the cheese box to some sort of education thing. And I don't know if they really made any real good use of it or not. Anyway, it's like I wonder if the cheese box could have been patched to run Uno somehow. Probably not, because it wouldn't have the language packs. Anyway. So the PC-98 was just like was an early Japanese PC that kind of coincided in era with the cheese box, Windows 3.1 and DOS. And it was like a variation on DOS. It ran DOS essentially, as far as I understand. And Japanese people, and as you know, my YouTube channel has a lot of Japanese visual novel stuff on it. The Japanese visual novel was essentially invented as something that you can use the PC-98 on. Like the PC-98 was a piece of hardware that made these visual novels possible. And so the mothers and fathers of Japanese visual novels we have today, they kind of continue this tradition, like Danganronpa and Zero Escape and AI the Somnium Files and Steins Gate. All that stuff, all that Spike Chunsoft, Mages, Capcom stuff. Because Capcom's is the visual novel business too, right? They didn't just make Resident Evil, they also made Ace Attorney, if you recall. That whole genre was started in the era of the PC-98. And there are many PC-98 games, and you can go on Wikipedia and you can look up a big long list. And some of them are more famous than others. And there are several famous ones, and several of them that were like the godfathers of modern Japanese visual novels. I'm not very familiar with a lot of them. I do know that one of, if not the most famous, was called Yuno, The Girl That Chants Love at the Bounds of This World. It's famous for branching timelines and a complex, twisty story. I don't know any real details about the story, but I just know that it was all complicated and, whatnot. Something you run into, though, when you begin to explore the world of PC-98 games is, as far as I understand, they are, I don't know if it's the vast majority or just an awful lot of them, are what I would call pornographic. As you all know, porn is very big in Japan. It's also very, very big in the United States, but if you can imagine, it's even bigger in Japan. And many of these PC 98 visual novels were porn, essentially. One of them was entitled Sex, and there was a sequel to it called Sex 2. I don't know if those games were any good or anything about them, but that was just something that stood out to me on the list. But even the ones that were, that weren't overtly titled like that were under the hood pornographic. And this famous game, is no exception. If you look at the cover art, which I don't very often for obvious reasons, of the PC 98 version, it's obvious from the cover art that it's a porn game. And you may have heard, like, us Americans and our unculturedness throw around this term hentai. As far as I understand, hentai is just the Japanese word for perverted. And so, like, if you were to say a pornographic cartoon in Japanese, they don't really have a word for, like, pornographic. So they would say it's like a perverted cartoon, or they would call it a hentai anime. And then us Americans just like to abbreviate it and call it a hentai. And so we will throw this word around just to refer to pornographic anime, essentially. And it might be a misuse. And I think part of the reason why people like to do that is because if you say pornography or porn, they will hear that word and it's like, ooh, it sounds all evil, right? Where if you say hentai, it sounds a bit more casual and you have a tendency to kind of brush it off more. Even though porn is porn, and it's just a connotation thing. So yes, these are hentai, if you want to use that word. Another word I hear being thrown around is eroge. And I actually don't know what that means. I didn't look it up intentionally. I don't want to know. But it sounds a lot like the Greek word eres. But I don't think that it may probably not related because unlike English, I don't think Japanese necessarily borrowed a lot of words from Greek. English did. Also, English and Greek are really deep common ancestor, likely. We call it Proto-Indo-European. But it's so deep back that really there isn't any resemblance to the words nowadays. At all. So most like the Greek-sounding stuff in English is borrowed. Anyway. And eros, which means like lust in Greek, is where we get the words erotic and erotica in English. So it sounds like it. I don't know if it's related or not. So another word you might get hear used for these these pornographic PC 98 games is eroge. Anyway, so it turns out, like, if I were to try to go back into history and try to look at the kind of the earliest Japanese visual novels and kind of explore in that zone, that have encountered a lot of hand-drawn sex, basically. Now, let's kind of continue on to the evolution of this landmark so-called game, It was later released, and I have to change windows here. For the Sega Saturn, which started to learn a little bit more about Sega console stuff. The Genesis and the Saturn and the Dreamcast. And 1 year later, so it came out in 1996, in the end, in December. So it was like almost 1997 when this game came out. For the Sega Saturn. And that's kind of like the demise. For some reason, I don't know why, in Japan, PC gaming, although gaming started on PC in Japan with the PC 98, isn't that popular. They all game on consoles in Japan. And I don't know if that has anything to do with why finding the PC copies of Japanese-only release games is so hard. Like, if you try to find the PC ports of the Infinity series on, like, the secondhand market, laying aside the download versions, I haven't dug into that too far, but, like, the physical, like, CD-ROMs, they're very difficult to find. And I don't know why exactly. It could be that the people who have them are just really hoarding them because of their value, or whether or not there just aren't very many because PC gaming wasn't very popular in Japan. But for some reason, PC gaming isn't popular in Japan, even though it started out as despite the PC 98. Anyway, so it went to console. This is for the Sega Saturn. But as I can glean from the Wikipedia page, yeah, Wikipedia pages are very, very, very dangerous to even, like, look at the first line of in a game with a complex story, because Wikipedia, by principle, doesn't care about spoilers whatsoever. And you're gonna get just blasted with them right from the start. Like, I scrolled down and skipped over the plot section and completely avoided it. But even if you read, like, stuff other than the plot, like about the ports and releases and stuff, you could still get spoilers. Because every single section on a Wikipedia page usually contains intense spoilers. Which makes it difficult to research these games well before buying them. And getting the right port and getting everything set up correctly, because if you do it the best way, you've probably done so much research that you got spoiled. And that's not a lot of research. It doesn't take a lot of research to get to that point. Anyway, so what I get from the Wikipedia page and the TLWiki page, which is archived using the Wayback Machine, is that the Sega Saturn version excised the pornographic scenes and replaced them with other scenes. And there was some kind of censoring involved. So move on from that. In 2000, it was released for Windows. 'Cause I guess Windows finally caught on in Japan by that point. Again, only in Japanese, though. And the Windows version, if you read the Wikipedia page, it sounds like it's very similar to the Sega Saturn release where they excised the porn. However, if you read the TLWiki page, it seems like they didn't actually do that. What they did is they put in, like, one single-cheeked censoring. They put, like, weird glints and reflections and specular reflections that don't make sense to hide the parts of the scene that would get it categorized as porn, essentially. Which, in my view, makes it really no different, right? Yeah, they apparently made it so that people have really shiny genitalia, is what my takeaway from the TLWiki page. And of course, in the Japanese, they censored a bunch of words and stuff in the Windows release. And then that was the last release for a while until 2017, where they came out with a remake that first came to the PlayStation and so on, and eventually came to PC and is on Steam. Now, this remake has localizations in it, so there is a commercial English translation of the remake. And as far as I understand from trying to carefully read the reviews that I've read, the remake does actually preserve the original Japanese-based text as the original PC 98 version, with the exception of those pornographic scenes, which are also excised in the remake like the Sega Saturn version. Now, so it preserves the original text. However, it does not preserve the original artwork. It does kind of pair one for one. So if there was a CG or a painting in the original, they remake the painting in the new style for the remake. So it has like a corresponding restylized set for the artwork. But it's not the same style. They had to restyle the painting. They restyled the paintings. And the reason why they did that is so that it would match an anime that they're going to make, which they made, which apparently is also hentai. It's funny because what I read said it's an adult anime. And that's the most ridiculous language because it's like this is for adults. Let me tell you something. That makes it sound like mature people are the ones that consume pornography and people that are less mature don't. Or once you're a certain amount of maturity, now you're mature enough to handle pornography. Does it really make sense to say that someone's mature enough to handle pornography? Does it make sense to say that if someone who's mature would watch pornography? Does this make any sense at all? This is something for adults. It's like an adult thing. Do you feel like you're being an adult when you watch pornography? So, I kind of hate that idea. Adult content. Yes. I tend to call it like... I mean, it's like rather probably would make more sense to call it kid content. If you're an adult, you should get out of that. Anyway. So... Anyway, because of the anime, they decided to redraw everything. And apparently they redid the gameplay mechanics such that I guess in order to preserve the original text, they have to preserve the original timeline structure to some degree, but they made it much easier. As you know me, I don't like things easy. I like things difficult. And sometimes I fail over and over again and get really frustrated like I am with this particular room in the World's Hardest Game 3. But I'm not a fan of making things that were previously difficult easier, such that the new generation doesn't have to be challenged to the same extent as the old one. And that's kind of my biggest disappointment about this remake, is apparently it's a little bit dumbed down in what it takes to actually figure out how to solve the game. They give you more hints and stuff. So, why would I play this game? Like, why does this matter? Why would I want to get a hold of this game and play it? Because, as you can tell from me doing the Infinity series, there's something I really like, which I can't really nail down and give a rational explanation to, about playing, like, going through the history and the evolution of mystery games, and mysteries, and puzzles, and twists, and jigsaw puzzle plots, right? So anything old and kind of at the origin of the classic Japanese visual novel branching timeline, I'm going to say pizza puzzle, jigsaw puzzle plot, suddenly my interest gets piqued, right? I found out about from finding out about the TL Wiki from the Infinity series. So, when I heard about this game, I thought, this is kind of right up my alley. This is like the Holy Grail, right? This is the kind of thing that I'd really want on my YouTube channel, like a Let's Play of this. This is like the thing. Why play anything? Like, this is the best, this is the most on genre. So I kind of started thinking about the logistics of how exactly I would go about trying to play this game. And I'm going to go through these various ports and kind of explain the advantages and disadvantages. So, the original PC98 port, which comes on floppy and comes on optical disc. As far as I understand, there are indeed PC98 emulators. I don't know if you can play it using DOSBox or a DOS emulator. There might be some language issues. But if you had a full-fledged PC98 emulator, for which those exist, I haven't downloaded and tried to run one, but they exist. I would be able, in theory, to run the original PC98 version. And so here's kind of the advantages of the PC98 version. As far as I understand, there are emulators for the PC98, and it seems possible that perhaps those emulators can actually connect to your external optical drive, which would be really nice. So it can be played and emulated. I don't actually need to import an actual factual PC98. And it is the original. It is the Hallmark game that is all the rage. The problems are, the disadvantages of this port are, one, it has pornographic scenes in it. It is a pornographic game. That is essentially a deal breaker. I don't deal with that. I do not watch pornographic content. I do not play pornographic games. I never have. So I basically can't do that version. You could do the awkward thing where you hold black construction paper over your screen, but then I have to edit the video and I have to blur stuff. And the blurring stuff, I have to look at it to blur it in DaVinci Resolve. And it's just not, that's just not good. Right? I can't really work with that. So the original PC98 version is essentially a no-go due to that reality. The second one is getting a hold of an actual legitimate copy of the original PC98 version is also extremely difficult because it is very old. It is from 1996. And there aren't very many of them out there on the secondhand market. Someone was selling one on eBay. They had it on the original shrink wrap, and I believe it was the optical drive version. They were selling it for $2,000. And I will assure you that I will never pay $2,000 for a video game. So, I haven't been able to find one of those for any sort of reasonable price, or even remotely close to reasonable price. Anyway, so that's the second one. It's actually really hard to get a hold of. I did go on the Internet Archive in order to get just the patch for the Windows version, to get the download just the zip file for the patch. And I noticed I didn't click on it that someone claimed to have uploaded a disk image of the original PC98 version of Uno. The problem with that is, well, that's piracy. And you can call me on some sins of my past. Like one that's easy to quote is this Never 7 the Eternal Edition. Hard to hide that one. This room is hard. But if I can not do that, that would be better than doing that, right? Like, I don't want to be that kind of person. Well, at least I got to the yellow dots that time. Got killed right afterwards, but at least I got there. So, and the third problem with the PC98 version is I have to be patient with that one because it's in Japanese. It's very unlikely I'm going to be able to even be able to machine translate it. I could use the OCR, but I have used the OCR. That's not the best thing to do. It might help if you have one sentence you don't know. It's best to have quite a bit of knowledge about how to read Japanese before you start reading something in Japanese, obviously. And so I have to kind of wait a few years to get some Japanese knowledge before I actually would start playing a Japanese version of Uno. Okay. Next, you have the Sega Saturn version. So what are the advantages of the Sega Saturn version? Well, as far as I understand, the scenes that are overtly pornographic were excised from the Sega Saturn version. And so if I'm going for the Sega Saturn version, I can avoid those. Does that fix everything? No, because as far, like, I believe when it comes to Uno, you could think of it like it's a cake, and there are candles on the cake. And the candles are pornography. And the candles were burnt, and as they were burnt, the wax melted and dripped down onto the cake. Then everyone takes turns blowing out the candles, and then you take the candles out because you want to make one that has a brighter, wider audience appeal, right? So you want to kind of not exclude the audience that just won't play the game if it has porn in it. Well, that wax that dripped down onto the cake is still left behind on the cake. And that wax left behind on the cake is kind of like what's left behind in Uno being an eroge. There's a lot of, as I don't know any specific examples, I haven't seen footage of this, or looked at specific lines, but as far as I understand, there's a lot of very coarse jesting and very raunchy humor in Uno. It's very sexual. So even if you take out the drawings of the sexual stuff and the company text that goes on top of those, you just get rid of those scenes, you still leave behind kind of this dirty, jokey game. And there's a certain amount of that I tend to tolerate just to get the good stuff out of the game. There's a certain amount of dross I tolerate to get the gold out, right? Danganronpa V3 is another example of a very raunchy game, but I would personally consider that acceptable for my YouTube channel. Like, you would still see me play something like that. But if you go much more than that, you're getting into a zone where I start to going like, uh-oh. So even if you take the porn scenes out of Uno, I'm not sure if that necessarily makes the game safe enough that I would play it. That is something that someone in the comments would maybe comment on. Just kind of like to give you guys kind of a reference about how much dirty joking I'm willing to take. I'll tell you, Danganronpa V3 level is acceptable. Okay? That is okay. Something that's like WAP is not, obviously. So, something like CPR is not. If we see stuff like that, I happen to stumble on that. That happened in my life. Another advantage to doing the Sega Saturn is that, again, it appears to be emulatable, right? So I don't need to buy an actual Sega Saturn secondhand that's Japanese region in order to play the game. I can do it straight up using my PC. It may be less convenient though than emulating the PC98 version, even though that's irrelevant because I basically said the PC98 version was out of the question. Because most emulators, as in almost all of them, can't communicate with your computer's optical drive. They require a disk image. Now, I don't know how easy or difficult it is to make a disk image of a Sega Saturn disk. I don't know if I just open up Brasero and make an image, whether or not it'll work. So I might end up with troubles making the image. And if you do end up with trouble making the image, it's likely intentional, which means you're violating Section A of Chapter 12 of Title 17. If they make it easy, there's no copy restrictions, well, you're fine. If there is stuff there intended to make it so that you can't do that, you're not fine. And you also need your disk image to be in a very specific format for some of these emulators to be able to read it. It's like not just any disk image will work. And I wasn't too prepared for this talk here. I forgot the name of the emulator I was looking at. that I'm sort of basing this off of. So you might kind of end up with the Xbox issue, which I eventually just kind of gave up and bought an Xbox, where yes, you can play it without an actual Sega Saturn if you have a disk image, but getting a non-pirated disk image may be difficult. That will actually run with the emulator. And lastly, is that you can actually get a hold of the game for not a ridiculous price. There appears to be a lot of copies of the Sega Saturn version out there for you to buy, and so it's not really scarce since the price isn't super inflated. You can actually get a hold of the Sega Saturn version. It actually exists out there. Now, the disadvantage of the disadvantages of the Sega Saturn version is, as I said, it may be difficult to get the emulator working. I might have some trouble with that and getting the imaging done. And it is also only in Japanese, so I have to learn Japanese for it. So I have to be patient. I have to wait to actually play it until I actually learn Japanese. Next is the Windows version. So, the Windows version has similar issues that the PC98 version has. That is, can't get it. Really rare. Yes, you can find pirated copies of it. Not on the Internet Archive this time. I don't know where you'd find them for the Windows version. But, I didn't search it up. But, getting a legitimate copy is very difficult. I haven't seen any on eBay or anything. I'll bring up like retro game stores and stuff like that at the end. Anyway, so doesn't exist. First problem. Second problem. As is out of the box, according to the TLWHG, it seems that the pornographic scenes have been put back in, just with really like lame and ineffective censoring. And reading the Japanese version, you have to deal with censoring the Japanese. Why? Which kind of makes it unpatched and still in Japanese out of the question. Luckily, the English patch by itself, unattached the entire game, can be downloaded off the Internet Archive. I actually have a copy of it on my computer. So that's the big problem with the 98 version. Is that you can't get it. That's the big issue. It's in high demand and there isn't very much of it. The reason why it would be such in high demand is because it's the version that people actually want. Because it's the version that the Americans can translate with the fan translation. What are the advantages of it? Well, I can translate it to English, and as far as I understand, the English translation made by the fans for it is superior to the commercial translation made by Spike Chunsoft for the remake. So, as far as I understand, I'm going to say that phrase a lot in here, the original Japanese base text between them is the same, but the quality of translating it to English and the preserving of the original meaning is better when done by the fans than when done by the company. Second reason why it might be good, it might not be, because I don't understand how this works. So, according to the TLWHG, the fan translators decided to make the fan translation put the Sega Saturn scenes that they used to censor the pornographic scenes back in. So they included them in the game. However, they also said that they included the original pornographic scenes as well. And uncensored them, even though the censoring doesn't really matter. It's still stupid censoring as far as I know. But, and so you go, okay, how did they do that? Because it doesn't explain exactly how they doubled them up. Right, what they may have done is just put them both in there, one after the other. Well, that doesn't help. Another thing they could have done is they make a toggle. So it's like, do I want the original PC-98 scenes or do I want the Sega Saturn scenes? And you can toggle them. That way, I can toggle it if it is like that, which I don't know if it is or not. I could theoretically toggle it into Sega Saturn mode. However, I still don't feel entirely comfortable with greasing the edge of pornography that way, where I have software on my computer that is a one toggle away from showing me hentai. Not something I'm sure I really want to mess with. And again, I'm not sure that it actually is a toggle. If someone who's actually played Uno or someone who has experience with the Uno English patch can tell me if it's a toggle or not, that would be helpful. I don't know. It might just be you get one after the other, and yeah, I'm really messing up here. I didn't even try, it appears. And that wouldn't really help me in avoiding the pornographic scenes. Now, if any of you knows good ways to get a hold of retro games, like a traveling kind of game sales setup where I can actually, like a secondhand games that actually can sell me Japanese region-only games and PC ones at that, where I can help find something like an English Windows version of Uno, that would be helpful. It's not something you really find at a thrift store, I don't think, because, well, it'll be an American thrift store. So maybe a thrift store in Japan, perhaps. See, I don't know if that's popular enough to be able to actually show up in one of those things, and the thrift store people actually think it has value and are willing to put it on the shelf. Okay, and then lastly, the fourth option is the remake. The advantage of the remake is it's very simple. Right? I don't have to deal with emulating it. I don't have to deal with it running on an old version of Windows. It's not Windows 10 and therefore may not work correctly, like Never 7, in which the Uno Windows version might have too, because it's meant for Windows 2000 kind of Windows. And end up trying to go on Linux and using Wine and trying to do stuff like that, trying to get to run. You don't have to deal with any of that, right? You just buy it on Steam. You download it, and then you click play, and it works. Very simple. But just it's the kind of devil's advocate for myself. That's not really what my YouTube channel is about. I'm not about playing games that are simple to play, that doesn't take some work to get them up and running. That's not the kind of thing that I want to do, right? So yes, that makes my life easier, but it may not be necessarily in the spirit of what I want my YouTube content to be. Second advantage, pornographic scenes are removed. Again, the wax on the cake, that residue is left behind, but the pornographic scenes are removed. For me, that is an advantage. The problems, and the third advantage, of course, although not the best quality translation, it is in English, so I can just play it right away, and I don't have to worry about learning Japanese for it. The downsides of the remake are... I'm going to start actually moving the block again here. It's just generally not in the spirit of what kind of games I want to play and what my YouTube channel is supposed to be. When I tried to do Never 7, I used the Eternal Edition to make the Let's Play. I actually haven't quite got a very satisfactory solution on getting the original version to work yet, but I have regrets about that. I feel like if I were to go back in time and do it again, I would fight to try to figure out a way to get the original to run competently. And do that as opposed to using the Eternal Edition. And that's not just for intellectual property reasons. That's because it's just so much cooler if you could get the original running in its original form, exactly how somebody would have experienced it when it came out, than it is to play some sort of remake or patch to get it to work for someone in the 21st century. It's just getting the original to work is just so much better content. It's just so much, in my view. So I have big regrets about that. I don't want that to be the norm, right? I'd rather have the original for its originality. And that's basically the big disadvantage of the remake. The remake, I believe, costs about, was it $55, $65, I think, or $50, somewhere around there. I only buy games off Steam when there's a Steam sale, so I'll wait till there's a sale before I buy it. I don't think it's going to go away. I don't think I'm in too much of a rush if I were to actually buy the remake. That may be what I go with, is just the remake. But it's not, I might regret it afterwards. Like, it's not what I wanted. It's kind of a compromise to go with the remake. And of course, there is a fifth option, which is just not playing the game at all. And that may be the best choice. I have plenty of other games I could play. I have a big backlog of them, right? I have You, Me, and Her sitting around. I haven't played yet. I have the second AI the Somnium Files game that I haven't played yet. I have a bunch of Danganronpa fan games, at least one of which is in English, that I haven't played yet. Like, there is so much stuff to play. I'm not running out of games to play. I'm not running out of ideas. I was at that at one point, but once I opened the box and I actually started researching various different kinds of games that I could play, stuff just fell into my lap, and now I'm just overflowing with games. I don't need to add Uno to get enough games. I would add Uno because of the value of Uno itself. I'd add Uno for Uno. And if Uno is just too raunchy a game, too much dirty joking, too much sexual content, then the best course of action would just avoid it. So I like mystery visual novels with complex stories, with twists, with branching timelines. I like the history of them. I want to go back to the source. But if the source is something kind of putrid and bubbling and monstrous, maybe I don't want to go back to the source. Maybe I don't want to go back to the trunk or the root of the Marbuzak and just fight the peripherals if it's too hard for me in there. So, yeah, it's a perfectly good option to just not play it. But if it's kind of like I can deal with it, I'm okay with it, then I would try it. Yeah, on that topic, I still haven't figured out how to get the original of Never 7 to work entirely. I want to do that so I can tell my viewers, this is how you get Never 7. This is a way in which you can get Never 7 to run. With the font the way it's supposed to be, with all of the cutscenes playing, with the background music playing, you know, it launches every time you want to launch it. Everything, life is good. How to actually get into that state, and I still haven't figured out how to do that, other than installing Windows 7 on a PC. I haven't tried virtual machines or emulators yet for older versions of Windows. If you have a PC that runs Windows 7, then you can get it to work. But that's not really the solution I really want to do, because I want it so that it's a solution that works and that will continue to work in the future. Running Windows 7 is kind of a hard way to fix it. Like, I'm hoping for like a way it's like easier to do on your modern system. To patch it so that it would work on a modern system. Anyway, so that's kind of the whole topic of Yuno, the girl who chants love on the bounds of this world. This not safe for work game that I'm kind of toggling back and forth in my head of where I want to play it on my channel. It wouldn't come right away. I'd have a lot of games to go through first. And I guess kind of asking my audience for advice on how to find old PC games, and whether or not this is a game I should even play at all. I should even touch with a 10-foot pole. Yeah. So, as you probably heard, well, I don't know if you necessarily heard that, because it kind of doesn't necessarily go one into the other. I mean, I am a Christian, but there are people who aren't Christians who are kind of the same way about this. And that I never search out pornography. The reason why I said search out is because as you go through life and as you browse the internet, sometimes you'll randomly stumble on something. For example, I was searching up stuff about the Danganronpa anime at some point in my past, and accidentally clicked on something that was absolutely disgusting. Or this happened a while ago, like on one of my recordings, where I was, I Googled I looked up Ever 17 on Amazon.co.jp, and I kept scrolling. I got some cover art that was perverted, So, as I go through life, sometimes I'll stumble upon something where I will say, what I stumbled upon was pornographic, and I click off right away. But I've never gone onto a computer and actually seeked out something that's pornographic. And there are various reasons why not to do this. For me, there are certain things about me that should be reserved for my spouse on her wedding night. And one of those is the impression on my brain about what erotic activity is supposed to be, right? I don't want to, she gets the say on how I get exposed to eroticism. And I don't have like garbage in my head about what women's bodies are supposed to look like, how there's like any of that stuff going into it. And it's not necessarily even the practicalities of it. It's like, that belongs to her. That opportunity for that fresh mind belongs to her. That's my thought process when it comes to porn. Now, you're not going to be able to open your Bible and pick up I pick out a very specific verse that says that in its very literal sense. You will find Paul say this is 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians. It's his letters to the Corinthians. Here Paul say, keep your marriage bed undefiled. And what he means by that is, don't drag things from around the world, things that, if you were in Rome, like that you did with the prostitutes, and try to do those same things with your wife at home. Right? Don't like have that problem where you cannot finish in the bedroom if you do not have a piece of erotic material next to you. Don't be in this situation. And that's a very similar idea to don't be dragging stuff from the world and pornographic media into your marriage bed. If that makes sense. So we get really, really close to saying don't watch pornographic material. But you have to kind of think about it. But in the practicalities, pornographic material is extremely addicting, and someone like me who has a very addictive personality and who's a lonely man who wants to have a spouse and does not, that's a big honkin' pit trap that you can fall into. Anyway, it always kind of bothered me, kind of the lines of like what constitutes porn and what doesn't, because sometimes we get very technical about things, like something I would call technical porn. What does technical porn mean? Technical porn to me means you have some really contrived criteria to say something is not pornographic unless it shows certain things, like it shows genitalia or something, shows a vulva and nipples. If you see no vulva and you see no nipples because of clever camera angles and stuff, or because they're covered by a sheet or whatever, then it's not technically pornography, right? And so you can have like a sex scene, like, I don't know, I never saw the Titanic, but I think it, as far as I understand, it has one in it. The movie for The Great Gatsby actually does have a sex scene, because I've seen that movie for A Great Gatsby. I think Contact has this kind of like implied sex scene, like it cuts to afterwards. It's like, this is not porn because they didn't show this and they didn't show that, right? Yeah, but effectively watching it, it's going to have a similar effect on you as watching porn. A big example is the music video by I think it's Animals by Maroon 5. Okay. Yes, I searched up that song because I heard something about it and I was curious and ended up stumbling into that music video. Okay. Somehow that makes it on YouTube. Somehow that was accepted as a music video for mainstream pop music. And I think it did so because it's like this technical porn problem where it didn't show these specific things, these specific body parts, and so it's not pornography. But like for all intents and purposes it is, right? Just got out of it on this technicality. Right, so you know what I'm saying? The world is full of pornography. That's just it's not hidden behind the screen, the black curtain at the back of the video rental place because of some technicality. I didn't watch the video again, by the way. Now, after that really awkward conversation, that was just really awkward, I guess I should turn my attention to being more earnest about trying to solve the game I'm playing in the background here. Because I'm actually playing a game. This is actually not a voiceover. I'm actually talking while like playing the game you see visually. Doing such an awful job. I don't remember this room being so hard the first time I played this, because I've gone through this room before. I have finished at some point in my life in the past. I have actually finished this room. I didn't remember it being this difficult, but it seems to be the room I'm the most stuck on in my replay. It's brutal. Ah. And I believe the way I did it was just what I'm doing now is I just kind of did this standard double grid weave technique. What's throwing me off, what makes it tricky is the lack of walls. Like I have to like artificially put up a wall in my mind between the grid weaves. Because to get to those center ones, you actually can't travel along a wall the entire time. You have to actually go into where there's no actual wall. Yeah. I think I want to kind of camp out there a little bit to get those, kind of fibulate back and forth to get those yellow dots. I could try going in horizontally again. I don't know. I feel like vertical is better for some reason. By horizontal and vertical, I mean which one do I go on the open side? Now it'll close in on me with that timing. You got to hit it in a better timing. Okay. It's hard to really, like, once you get right there, though, you're all in this crazy panic mode. You can't really decide, like, make decisions very well, because you're just trying to maintain position is enough work in itself. I hate to end this recording and literally get no more yellow circles than I did at the start of this recording. That would be bad. I should do a Let's Play of sexy hiking. Just get more. That will come someday. You see more of me, hear more of my. I have to like lock down like a specific thing I'm doing every time. Lazy. Like I'm always doing this a little differently each time. Probably isn't the best. Because if I just practice one routine, I can get really good at it, right? If I do a bunch of different routines, it's like my first try every time. Imprecise. Was not precise enough to aim inside those grid spaces better. Use the grid. This game would be so much harder if it didn't have the grid. Which means the real world's hardest game is the world's hardest game with no grid. If it makes the world's hardest game 5, which you probably won't, that will be what the final level will be, is it just has no grid. It's stuff like this, but with no grid. Let's try going over the top, just for a change to change stuff up. It's actually harder, but whatever. Oof. How long have I been recording? 1 hour. Okay, well in that case, no progress has been made. Signing out.